How's it going, guys? I know many of you have been waiting for some videos from me, especially this one, which talks about the rear-wheel drive custom builds that I did for the Jiabaile little, 143 scale cars. There's all kinds of stuff that I actually need to make videos on and discuss. Obviously, like comparing all these new models that are coming out to like the Jiabaile and who's going to be the best, like what categories, which all of that's going to take a lot of time, and it's hard for me to even find time just to tinker on these things as it is. So I'm going to do my best to do like a comparison video, but there's still a few more models that are coming out right now that I still need to review to even add to this list. I know wltoys just came out with this one, which I will do a review on after I do this video. And there's a couple other ones that are out as well. I will give you a spoiler. I did get this Snelco rear-wheel drive one. I got it on sale, so I got it for like $20 less or more than what they are usually going for at this moment. So I figured I'd just scoop one of those up because I want to compare that to my rear-wheel drive custom builds, which I'm going to discuss in this video. This is mainly what this is going to be about, and there's some other custom builds that I want to talk about as well. I'll do some other videos on that, like this one. HStar RC already did a video on converting the Whoosh, that's the name of the company, Whoosh RC or whatever. This is their chassis, and their bodies are almost very similar to the same exact chassis as the Jiabaile's. So you could swap the electronics and everything between these. And what's nice about this chassis is that the quality of the chassis is way better than I would say some of the Jiabaile quality that you get. And it has rear suspension and all the things that you wish like a Jiabaile would have came out of the box with. This one seems to have when it comes to part of the chassis, but then it doesn't have a servo like the regular, all the other ones. It doesn't have a normal servo. It has one little, cordless, brush motor and stuff. It's just terrible choice. I don't know why they went with that either. And HStar RC also covered all this stuff in his video when he did his little conversion, and basically convinced me that I should do that as well when I watched it, because now that I feel it and see this frame and the quality of like how everything is, there's barely any like slop or movement in the little wheel hubs here. Like like the tolerances between everything is much tighter and nicer, and like it just seems like they put a little bit more time into making sure all that fits nicely. But they just for some reason opted out for a servo, which would have made this car much nicer if they just went with a regular servo. But overall, there's this new conversion now where you can take the Jiabaile boards and put them on here, and he already did a video on his, and I'll do a video on how I did mine as well later on. But this is not about that right now. I just want to give you a heads up. So yeah, go check out HStar RC's channel and go sub and like his videos and give him some love. Okay, so these are the two custom rear-wheel drive builds that I did that are basically clones of the Jiabaile's, which most of you guys are aware of the Jiabaile chassis and cars and everything. I mean, we got enough videos of these things now. They've been out for over a year. So here we go. Let me get one of these chassis out. So I already have the electronics board and everything off of this one. This one's basically a spare parts car. So I'll probably end up using this servo, maybe the motor, and maybe some other parts later on. And then if I want to swap to using those bigger wide bodies, I'm going to have to use the wheels on one of these if I want to maybe run that body, for whatever reason. But overall, this is just a spare parts car right now. And these two rear-wheel drive setups are based off of this chassis. It's, it uses all the parts for the chassis, and for the most part, the wheelbase is the same except for the adjustable one. I actually made an adjustable wheelbase one where I can shift it so I can, add die-cast bodies like this Lamborghini right now, which came out really well. I wasn't even sure if this was going to work out or not, but this actually did. I did do a version 1 of this build that didn't work out, and this is like the version 2 that actually worked. And then of course I put the die-cast body on it once I got it working correctly. But the original one, I tried to do rear suspension, like my own version. I tried to take the front of a original one with rear suspension and then put it on the back to have the same as the front as the back. And it's funny because all the new models that are coming out with rear suspension almost kind of do that, to where they took the front and then just put it in the rear. So that's originally what I tried to do, and it didn't really work out. The rear end would not get good traction. It would constantly want to pull to the right. and it would just spin out constantly, so it was just driving me crazy. So I eventually gave up on that one, and then I went back to this rear end that's, you know, the stiff little, you know, rod going through there, and actually it drives way better now. So that's why I'm kind of like torn on this whole suspension situation in the rear, because this actually does really well without any rear suspension at all. But I really only drive this on a glass table, so there's completely flat, and that's the only way this actually really drives well, is if I drive it on like something that's really, you know, flat. If I drive on anything bumpy, it does get a little bit rough back there. So it's like, I do want rear suspension, but I'm just surprised at how well this drifts without having rear suspension compared to trying to have it before. But that model might have just been flawed because it was using the crappy, you know, Jiabaile front end, which has a lot of sloppy movement and stuff on the back end, and it wasn't getting good traction because of it. So some of these newer models, like say if I use the rear end on this one, this actually might be a suitable, you know, rear end to use for, say, my rear wheel drive setups if I'm going to do another Jiabaile version of this chassis. Because I do plan on doing like a 143 scale one that's like completely just different than all these, not like a clone of the Jiabaile, not trying to use the exact same chassis. I want to make one that's like, you know, custom scratch. But then I do also want to keep some of these that are the Jiabaile chassis, so I can kind of still use the bodies and still use them. I mean, because it's still nice. You know, set up, nice chassis and everything. Overall, like, it works. It's not the, you know, the greatest when it comes to the designs and everything. Like some other ones out here are better designed, but they don't mean that they actually are going to drift that much better too, though. So it's really weird how all these, you know, some of these are coming out of different ideas that you would think would be better or make them, you know, drift more. But it seems like the Jiabaile still somehow drifts, for the most part, better than most of them out there, even with all the design changes that they made. And then everybody else on top of that, that is not doing anything different, are just making the exact same copy of the Jiabaile with just slightly different tolerances within the chassis and everything. So, like the 88 RC one is almost exactly the same thing as a, you know, Jiabaile chassis as well. They just added the rear suspension, but there's so much sloppy movement. I looked at the holes in the top posts, and there's about 0.5 millimeter extra space around the top post, so that's why these wheels just rock back and forth. So this is like, that's terrible quality control on these. So that's something I'll discuss in these when I do the comparison between all these. I mean, it still drifts all right, but you know, it just has like, those wheels just are really, really sloppy in there. Okay, so yeah, I'll do a video on this guy soon after I do these. All right, so this one I made before this one. This is the one I wanted to make an adjustable chassis, so that's why I have this plate down here so I can shift it back and forth depending on what body I wanted to put on there, because originally the idea was to put die-cast bodies, or, you know, there might be different wheelbases. Like this one is 62 millimeter. I think most Jiabaile cars are like 63.5 millimeter wheelbase, so it's like 1.5 millimeter to 2 millimeter off, so that actually mattered in the wheel well, so I had to shift it. And then, so, you know, I had to cut a good little chunk of plastic between the two plates so that I can actually shift it closer. And then, of course, I 3D printed this little plate. It's just a little rectangle with some, you know, screw slots to just, you know, attach the two pieces together, and then you loosen the nut and stuff on the other side of there to bring it closer or pull it further away. That's really all there is to it. I'll take it apart here in a second too, so you can see. And then this one, I didn't do anything adjustable. I just wanted to keep this one to, you know, just like normal stock Jiabaile, like chassis, no adjustable or anything like that, so I can just put the normal bodies on here. And I just stuck with the, you know, the R34 for a while, running this thing. And they both are a little bit different, even though they're the same. So the steering mechanism and everything all is the same. So really there's not much difference other than the weight, and I don't think there's that much other than, you know, adjusting the, you know, the length and everything. So they're both the same cars. They're just, this one's a little bit heavier, not a whole lot heavier, but almost twice as heavy, I'd say. But I do add weight to this one too, and I add weight to this one because they need weight in certain areas to drift properly, either adding weight behind or in front. And it also depends on what you're driving on. So if you're driving on the glass table, it's completely different than, say, trying to drive it on the hardwood floor. Like, I can drive these on a hardwood floor, but I have to like take the weights off. But if I drive on the glass, like on a table or something, I have to put weight on it. It's just like, there's so many different little things that you have to change or do to make them work on different surfaces and stuff. It's like this, it's a lot of work to like test these things and try to figure all this stuff out. All right, let's take this one apart. And yeah, this one has no rear suspension, so I know some people don't really care for this little suspension mod we did, but I mean, I feel like it still helps. So I have that spring back there. And it's a really easy spring, so it's not too tight. It works. Like, it helps just get rid of some of that bouncing that's back there. It's obviously not real suspension, but whatever, you know, I still use it. So yeah, so there's the regular R34 body, and then this would be the Jiabaile chassis that's been like converted for rear-wheel drive. So I did the steering angle with the little T-mount wiper, you know, setup here. I'm using the same servo that came with the car. I just turned it, you know, 90 degrees, and then use a tie rod that goes to the T-mount that pulls it back and forth here. And so I'm trying to look through the camera while doing this. So. And I mean, it's not perfect. It has a little sloppy movement here and there, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. That's just the way these things are. I do want to design this to be a little bit tighter, but it is for what it is for now. That's the best it's going to be. So I'm using a little DasMikro 6 amp ESC right here. It's 1S, so it runs on, you know, 3.3 to 4.2 volts. Then of course the DasMikro V5 Gyro is right behind it, so I have you know, one of those on there, of course. And then I use the RadioLink transmitter. I have a V2, the RC6GS or whatever. This thing I got, like, I don't know, a while back for like 60 bucks, and it does exactly what I need for this cheap stuff. Like, you can get these little 4-channel receivers for RadioLink that are pretty small, and I just have to desolder the pins to make them, you know, like just flat. But this is one of the smallest receivers I can even find out there, unless you want to buy like Futaba or any of those other ones, you know. And you're spending hundreds of dollars and stuff on other, you know, if you want the Noble, I'd probably get a Noble Light or something like that. If I was going to get like another transmitter, I'd probably get like that, the MB4. But right now I'm fine using the RadioLink. It's cheap. I can get these for like 15 bucks roughly, you know, sometimes give or take depending on the time of year. And, you know, all I need is this little receiver, this little ESC, and then this, you know, gyro together, and that's all you need to get one of these running, you know, other than the battery and everything, of course. But for the electronics, that's all you need to get this going. So that's what I have. Same exact thing in here is a tiny little ESC, the gyro, and then the receiver. I had to make it a little bit more low profile inside here, so I had to get rid of these connectors that are on the DasMikro gyro here. I kept them on this one because I wanted to use this one for testing. If I need to swap it or whatever, I want to be able to still use those plugs. But this one I knew I have to get rid of the connectors to be able to fit underneath there. And I, you know, I did the best I could, and I got it down pretty low. So I'll show you guys that in a second too. I'll take this chassis apart. I had to 3D print a little mount here for the front to basically just mimic the style for the Jiabailes, so I can just slide the front end just like you do on those bodies. And then same thing in the rear. I kind of designed it, well, actually not really same thing. It's not really made the same way. I actually had to make basically the bumper wing. I had to build into the mount, and then I can screw the screw like through the chassis to pinch it to the little wing mount through this top screw here. So this like goes down into it, and that goes up into it, and that pinches it like together. So all I gotta do is loosen this screw, and then I can just take the back end out and just slide it out. It's actually pretty easy to take apart, as long as I don't, like, you know, mess up the threading too much inside there. I usually just make sure I just get it back in the same threads, and it tightens down really well. But I'm probably going to change this all up. I'm going to probably end up using maybe one of these chassis to rebuild this one, you know, make it adjustable, but use this chassis instead of the Jiabaile, and see if I can get this to work better with, like, you know, some rear suspension and stuff. So I'll actually maybe make a video on rebuilding this rear-wheel drive setup with the new, like, one of these whoosh chassis, you know, chopping it up and doing the same steering angle mod and everything on this chassis. I'll probably do all that in a video since I know what to do now. I've done it before. But this is not really my ultimate, you know, rear-wheel drive setup. It's going to be one of the other builds I have that I'm working on that's going to be completely different than this, that I'm, you know, hoping will be like the best one out of all of these. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how this one came out, because I, you know, had a lot of fun with it. I really haven't been able to have time to, you know, drive these around as much as I would like to. I barely even have time to like actually work on them. And then I'm ordering some of these new ones I want to test out and see what they're all about. And it's just like, it takes forever to come in the mail too. Sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes a month. It's like the waiting game. All right, so here is the Lamborghini one, which it's the same thing as this one. I got weight in different areas that I'm allowed to have to keep it much lower underneath that body, because it's just a die-cast body, and I had to tape these doors because they used to have little swivel mounts where you can open the doors and stuff, but they were interfering with the wheels and everything, so I had to basically just Dremel all that away so the wheels don't get snagged on any of that stuff. And then I just tape the doors in place so I can take those off if I ever wanted to, but don't need to, of course. So yeah, here's not this piece. This is like part of the die-cast thing. This is the mount I 3D printed that goes to the wing. That's basically part of the wing. So it's all like, connected together. Put that piece back on, and then the screw goes through, and that's it. So this came out, pretty well. I didn't know if I was going to have much luck getting this die-cast body to, mount correctly. I was originally going to try to do it with magnets, but I ended up doing the 3D printed mounts instead. So yeah, I put electrical tape on everything just to make sure it doesn't touch anything metal on this body on accident and short anything out. On top of that, I also wanted to make it look black inside there, so when you're looking through the windows or whatever, all you see is black. So electrical tape over that, made it look dark in there. Also, it protects everything from touching metal anyway, so that worked out that way. Here's a connector. I made it long enough to where I could reach it out the window, and I can plug it in and then charge it through the window and everything. So that's how I charge it and plug it in, and then I just shove it back in the window while I'm driving it. It needed a little bit of weight here, a little bit of weight around here, because the servo plus the electronics is a little bit different weight than, say, just the battery over here. So I had to add weight in the front to counter the weight on that side. So the battery plus, this, like, I think it's like 3.5 grams or whatever, is about the same as that side. And then I think it was a little bit heavier over here, so I had to add one over here plus those. And that got to like where I felt comfortable, especially driving on the glass table. I did have to add a few more little coin-shaped weights inside there in the front. So, and it's also die-cast, but it's a very lightweight die-cast body for a metal body. It's nowhere near as heavy as like that D43, Skyline body. That thing's much heavier than, say, this thing. It's very lightweight. So I had to actually add extra weight to make it, drift better on the glass table. So, yeah, let me go over some of the stuff here. There's really nothing else different I can show you. I can't really get in there and show you how I adjust it, but you see there's a nut there. I always just have to loosen that nut just to get this to shift back and forward. That's all I have to do for this. So there's really nothing else to really show you other than that. Like, I had to sit here and cut away all the plastic around these areas so the little wiper mounts can clear and not get stuck or snagged on anything. And there's barely any plastic holding all this, so it's pretty fragile, and it could break if I smash into something head on too hard. So this thing is driving on borrowed time, basically. That's why I'm hoping to make a better design that's going to be much stronger and everything than this. But these are fun for now, as long as they're working. But you break it or crash or whatever, and then it's broken, then it's kind of just worthless. But at least you can get enough of these little Jiabaile parts right now to keep this thing running until we have something better. So yeah, the little swivel mount is just, I put a screw right through there, and it's sitting on, I think, a little nut, and then there's a bearing inside this. So just one of these tiny little wiper T-mounts. I've made similar ones for my wltoys K969 for that one, but a bigger version and stuff. But I just shrunk that down to a smaller size. I'm using a little 5mm flange bearing just shoved in there, and that does pretty well, because you gotta be careful. When you're putting a bearing in here, it might like shift up and down this way. You don't want that. You want it to stay nice and firm, and just only be able to rotate left and right. You don't want any of that like wiggle, like sloppy movement. So it's hard to get a bearing in here that's going to stay nice and snug. Because 3D prints, it's hard to get everything, like all the tolerances and everything perfect. And then I sandwich this with like a lock nut, a washer, a couple little different type of washers, and a lock nut, so that there's still freedom of movement, like, you know, there's no friction or anything when it's going back and forth, but it can't, like, I can't push it up and down. It's not wiggling up and down. It's staying nice and firm, but not too tight to where it can barely turn left and right, because if you tighten the nut down too much, it'll be hard to turn it, you know. So it needs to be just loose enough to where it can turn, but not too loose to where it's moving up and down too. So that was, you know, one of the things I had to, you know, figure out while I was putting that together. And it's just your usual little push tie rod that hooks to the servo. These tiny little, you know, ball joints, man. Everything's so small. It's just such a pain to work on all this stuff, dude. I mean, it's worth it. It's fun when you get it to work, but man, this stuff just, you know, it sucks sometimes. So this is how this came out. I mean, so far, like I said, I'm pretty happy with everything, but I want to upgrade it all to the newer stuff. So this whole chassis I want to swap out for, like, say a Whoosh, you know, chassis. I do have some of those coming, so I'm planning on doing that. I'll give you a little quick test drive of these, just so you can see them in action, because I really don't give these things enough love. It's been a while. All right, I should have probably lined up the connectors before I did that. Yep. Let's get one of them with the second one. Careful sticking metal tweezers around in areas. There we go. Okay, so let me put the Skyline back together, and then I'll just do a quick drive. I'll show you that you can actually even drive it on, like, a table this small. Like, it's not perfect, because, and don't be deceived by this table. It's not perfectly flat. There's bumps and everywhere. Like, I've pressed down on this table, you know, different areas. It's really bumpy. Like, this plastic doesn't really hold very well, so. But it'll still, you know, drift decent enough, but it's definitely, you're going to see that bounciness in the rear end because of it. It's nowhere near as bad when I'm drifting on the, like a glass table. It's just nice and flat. So, I mean, there's a little bit of, you know, vibration back there, but nowhere near as bad. Okay. This little guy. All right. So I will plug in. All right, so let me just show you what I do on here. All right. So the first one we got is the Skyline. I guess I'll just run that one real quick. And then I'll go over to the glass table and run them real quick on the glass table too, so you can see them in action. And then I'll just pretty much, you know, call it for this video. And then I will do some other videos of, like, this Whoosh build, and then the comparison between all the other ones and some other stuff is coming out, and, you know, another part to this video as well on how these custom builds are going to be. All right, so let me plug this in. This is always, like, the most painful part, is trying to get these plugged in. It's pain. Oh yeah, these are kind of cracked out when I do get them going. The servo likes to be a little crazy sometimes. Sometimes it's, like, calm, and sometimes it's, like, on drugs. So, all right, let's see. A little squirrely, it's a little bumpier, but, you know, you can kind of see and get the idea. Like, look how crazy the steering is on this thing, even the gyro and everything. Like, gyro's not even that high, but these things are, like, cracked out no matter what. I can't really tone them down too much, and that's the only way they have to be that way to even drive, like, well on this kind of stuff, man. It's crazy. You know, it is so difficult to, like, try to figure out how to get these to work. They're so, like, unpredictable. Yep. And, you know, it depends on what surfaces you're on. And then also, I think the tires are also going to be something that we need to talk about. I have these POM little tires on here. These are not the stock tires. I do like these, but they're kind of expensive for what they are. These stock tires do work, but these both, there's pros and cons between them all. I'll have to make a whole other video on that. You know, it's like everything's going to take so much time to explain. You know, it takes a lot of time, you know, testing as well to even figure this stuff out. But yeah, these tires do well on glass. They do well, I think, on hardwood as well, and it seems like they do okay on this. And this is kind of like a roughish kind of surface compared to the other things, which is something else I want to talk about, because the type of material on your tires might have, you know, some different, you know, driving characteristics on these surfaces. Like the Haiboxing, the HBX, I think this material seems to do better on here when I'm trying to, I'm trying to do like a rear wheel drive setup on one of these, but this is actually, it's got better grip on here with these wheels, because one of the issues it has is the rear grip. It wants to spin out when I try to do a rear wheel drive setup. I'll do a video on this thing as well, but I'm just in the middle of testing it right now. All I did was take out the CVDs, okay? It's still the same exact thing, and also I'm using the DasMikro V5 Gyro on it because the gyro built into it is garbage. For rear wheel drive testing, it's not designed for that, because you pretty much have to go full throttle to get it to engage. It's stupid. Whatever. So I'm using the DasMikro, and I just took out the CVDs, but the front axle and everything is still in there because it has to be to keep the drive shaft in place. But eventually, if I get good results, I can just take away all the electronics, get rid of that gear shaft and everything, and maybe make this into a real drive setup. So I'm doing some testing on that, and I'll let you know. So all right, so you saw this little guy in action on this. I'll do the Lamborghini next, because they do have different characteristics, even though they're kind of exactly the same kind of car. So yeah. Okay, and then I just go charge this on my normal battery charger. I have, you know, chargers from my drones and this and that. I just charge my 1S batteries on that stuff. Or the USBs on the stock ones, but that's how I have to charge these little batteries. Where's the Lambo? There we go. All right, let me switch over. Yeah, let me go over some of the stuff on here, because I didn't really do that. So the gyro on that Skyline right now is around 40. So that's where it really needs to be to do well. It's not the same for the Lambo. I think the Lambo needs to be down to 30. So that's where I would adjust, because I have it set up on the wire for the, you know, the DasMikro, so I can change them on this dial. All right, so let's go change the model real quick. All right, so this is the Lambo. And then what I usually have to do is set the endpoints. So for the steering, right now, like the Lambo's at 70% the endpoints for the steering, because any further than that is too much, and I honestly don't need to go past anywhere near like 100%. So I knocked that down, and honestly, it kind of messes. It's too much on there. You need to knock it down a little bit to kind of tame it. And then the throttle also is important. Like I have it down to about 55. I usually do around 50, 55 on this, depending on what I'm driving on. I think I had it down to 50 before. I might switch it or not. And then reverse is 40. Doesn't really matter that much for reverse. But this is the thing about rear wheel drive. You need to be able to change the throttle resolution. You know, because I need to knock down, instead of it going all the way to 100% power, I need to knock it down to, like, say 50% is max power, and then you need a throttle curve from that 0 to 50% as like your new 0 to 100% to really gain the right kind of power that you're going to need for like the rear wheel drive, because it's not the same as the all-wheel drive. So these electronics on these all-wheel drives will really not work out on a rear wheel drive setup. They're not going to work the same because they're not designed to do that. So that's why I'm really not having any luck with any of the electronics that come with these all-wheel drive setups when trying to do like a rear-wheel drive setup. They just don't work. So that's why I have to do these little tiny, you know, DasMikro ESCs and stuff, which these are great. I mean, this is a 6 amp ESC. That's great. That's plenty for what we're doing with these little things. So, and you also can add lights to them too. You can, there's headlights and taillights, I think. On the bottom part, you can solder them on, and they function like brake lights and everything. But I'll do that later on with these, but it's not really on my top of my list right now. Okay, let me plug this guy in and show you how it drives, you know, with those settings and stuff. And there's other things too that I have to usually change on the, you know, the transmitter to get these things to drive the way I want them to. Because they're weird. You just got to sit here and try everything until you like find out what works. Nothing really makes sense ever. But eventually, you know, if you try enough stuff, you'll find something that does work. Like so far, I've had somewhat success. So this one does not handle the bumps as well as maybe the other one did, but it's still. It's like really touchy and easy to make any adjusting like moves. And then like whipping hard left or right is almost like pulling the e-brake. It like automatically will whip your back end around. So if you want to do like a quick tail slide or you know, pull your tail around, you would just you know, hook hard left or hard right to do that. But you know, only if you're going like really slow, not when you're going fast, of course. I can barely even touch the throttle, like I'm just barely touching it, and it still has control. Oh, a little bit. Of course, we're not gonna say that. And that's with 55. Let me drop down to 50 actually. Usually in the glass, I think I have it on 55. I mean, I can literally not even really hit the throttle hard. Reverse doesn't always work out too well. So it seems like it would benefit from some rear suspension, especially on like a bumpy table like this right now. But you can see, like, I do have control of it. I'm making sure that it's not flying off the table or going anywhere. And I mean, if I really sat here and focused, I can, you know, do little donuts and stuff around, like, you know, cones and stuff, but oh, too much. And sometimes I got knocked down. Like if I'm turning in a little bit too hard, I'll switch to say 65. Whoops, wrong way. So drop it down like 5% on the steering, and then the steering will be a little bit less aggressive. And then of course I can keep doing that until I feel like I'm comfortable. I can drop it down to 60 and see if that's where I want it. And this is basically what you have to do while you're setting these up, to like tune it to get it where it needs to be. And then you'll eventually get it right where you want it for the most part. And of course, like I said, it depends on what you're drifting on. You might be drifting on, you know, glass table and this and that. You have to change it every time. But at least you get the idea. All right, so it drifts way better on glass. Let me show you that. Just hold on one second. All right, let's see this thing on glass. Let me drop the steering down a little bit. A bit too much. And then throttle as well. I mean, it can be a little squirrely, but I mean, you get used to it. Obviously, it's never going to be perfect. I'm never going to drive this thing like it's a perfect drift car. Like, yeah, right. This thing's just, you know, slapped together with a bunch of parts. Like, I'm happy it's somewhat even controllable right now. See, like, once you like mess with the steering and the throttle and you kind of get it tamed, it's not bad. I mean, you know, sometimes the steering can get a little bit out of control. But you know, you can do a few things to mitigate that. And I definitely need more practice with this thing. It's been a while since I've been playing with them, so they have not been getting any love. But you get the idea. Like, the more you play around with this thing, the more, you know, you get better at controlling it. And like, I don't even want to get too used to this one because I'm eventually gonna basically rip it apart and put the you know, the whoosh chassis on this thing anyway. Or I'm going to keep this one around just in case I ever want to retest it again. If for some reason it doesn't work out on the other one, I'll keep the base of the chassis, like, you know, still together with the servo and everything, so I can just like throw it back in. I'll just have the electronics like easy to you know, swap on and off the chassis if I ever need to. So let me just turn this one off and then throw the Skyline back on, and then I'm gonna show you the Haiboxing. You know, while like basically try to show you how a rear-wheel drive setup would go if you try to take the front dog bones out or anything, or the front, you know, axle, and try to do it that way on the all-wheel drive setup. You pretty much get the same results on all of them. They'll just spin out. If you take the front, you know, diff or axle or the dog bones out and then try to run, you know, rear-wheel drive on those all-wheel drives, you know, 99% of the time they're just going to spin out. You'll never really get good control. So the Haiboxing one I have is getting kind of close to being controlled, but I think I have to get rid of the electronics to actually make that one work. So I'm just going to mess around with the stock electronics for now, but ultimately I have to take off the electronics to actually get that one to maybe possibly work without doing too much mod for like a rear-wheel drive setup. So the Haiboxing may have, you know, potential to be a rear-wheel drive drifter. So here's the other one. Oh, I definitely didn't even change the model. It'll still drive like on, you know, a different model. It's just, you know, it's gonna have different settings for like the steering and all that stuff. Alright, so I switched it. Let me turn the gyro back up again too. This one needs to be a little bit higher on the Skyline. Okay. So like I've messed with this one too, adding weight and taking off weight. So far having a little bit of weight in the front and definitely having some weight in the back to help get this one under control better, as well as let's see what the steering, hold on, the endpoints are. For steering is like 65-ish, and then I even dropped the throttle down to 40 on this one, and it's still, I mean, look how fast it is. That's 40% full throttle when that's full throttle at 40%. So you can see why you have to drop the throttle down, because at 100% this thing would be out of control. It's like trying to, you know, train a you know, wild horse. Well, I kind of drove into that one. Yep. Okay, yeah, so I need a little bit more tuning and playtime with this one too to kind of dial it back in again. But like I said, I'll probably change the chassis to the other one, so I don't want to get too used to this one. So even this gyro might need to go down, maybe down to 35. Oh yeah, I got this DasMikro one is the one without brake, or it like doesn't have, it just goes directly from forward to reverse. I hate it. I'll never get one of those again. All the other ones I have are normal, but I accidentally got one that doesn't have a brake in there, so it literally goes forward, back. Look at it. There is no brake. I hate that. So it's not good for the motor. I don't like doing that, so I try to refrain from hitting brake or reversing on this one, because it just completely reverses direction instantly when I do it. So that's not good for the motor. So don't ever get one of the DasMikro ESCs, or any ESC really, that has no brake for these little cars, because they will you know, basically damage themselves if you're not careful, you know. So I suggest getting one with a brake. I've already, you know, dragged this out way too long. You guys get the idea. So I'm gonna do some more videos on the custom builds. I'm gonna redo them with the what do you call it, the Whoosh chassis and everything. So I'll probably do a video of rebuilding them and then showing them in action when they're done. So I was just giving you a, you know, show and tell of how these things are set up right now and how they work on the old school Jiabaile. And here's the Haiboxing. I will give you a quick little demonstration of like what it would be like if you took out the front CVD. This one had CVDs, not dog bones. So I took the CVDs out of the front because it actually has a caster and everything. So this one seems like the most promising chassis for like a rear-wheel drive setup. So, but I think the stock electronics are one of the things that are holding it back. That's why I have to use the DasMikro Gyro. So, and the biggest thing that you're always going to run into trying to get one of these all-wheel drives to drift like a rear-wheel drive is it's going to spin out constantly. You're just never going to get the right amount of traction. It's just I mean, I put weight all over this thing. This thing's actually nowhere near as bad as it was if I didn't have the weights on it. Like, this is with weight. And this is on the lowest setting for its speed, which whatever that setting is. And as soon as you start getting a little bit of speed going, it immediately just does a spin out. There's just no way of controlling it. No slow. It's just not like the other two that I was just driving. I just can't get it to cooperate. So I have a feeling that I'm going to have to try to change out the electronics to maybe even get this thing to have a chance to function. I don't know if the drive shaft still like running the axle in there with nothing attached to it causes any drag that is, you know, not needed. But I just think it's because I can't change the throttle resolution and everything, and I can't change the steering angles. I mean, there is dual rates on here, so I can actually change the steering a little bit on this, but it doesn't matter. I've tried going down and up and this and that, nothing matters. I mean, I put the gyro up and down. I've tried everything, and it's so close to almost like feeling like you can get it to drift, and then it just spins out. But then if I make the steering angle too low or you know, too much gyro, then it just doesn't turn at all. It's either not enough or too much. It's never in between. So I'll keep playing around, testing stuff, you know, and see what I can come up with. But I feel like the best option would be to just get rid of these electronics and then go with like a DasMikro. At least just a test run to see how it all functions, if it even makes a difference. If it doesn't do anything different, then I'll just scratch that idea and probably ditch this one for a rear-wheel drive setup and just continue to keep doing the custom builds. So I know this was a long video. I had a lot to go over. There's a lot more coming. I have, you know, plenty of stuff to talk about, plenty of things to cover. I got to start getting on these builds. I've been kind of slacking lately. I've been, you know, busy with life. So sorry about all that. But once again, thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave them down below. I'll do my best to answer everything. Like, you know, I'm just learning and testing all this stuff myself, so don't expect me to know everything on all this. I'm just finding out as I go with, you know, making some, you know, changes and you know, doing some stuff along the way that I think possibly could work. It's a lot of trial and error anyway. Eventually, you know, I feel like we get to a place where we find, you know, what works and what doesn't. So I'm hopefully gonna get somewhere with all this rear-wheel drive stuff, because they just keep coming out with all-wheel drive. I'm tired of it. I want some rear-wheel drive stuff, you know. But all right, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you guys in the next video.